Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and today we're going to be talking about this. This is a package that comes from Castlemania Games. I've worked with them in the past, really cool guy, and I highly recommend checking out their website. There will be a link in the description if you want to get this or any other products that are available at Castlemania Games. Feel free to do so. But yeah, let's just take a look at it and see what it is. But of course, you know, let's just be transparent as hell about it. Obviously, this was sent to me for free for review purposes, so once again, thank you very much to Castlemania Games for doing that. But when you see what it is, it seems pretty obvious that I would do this. This is the HD cable for Dreamcast by Hyperkin. Now, so what this is, obviously I haven't used it yet, it's just, you know, still brand new in the box. But what this is, and just what it sounds like, it's a cable for the Dreamcast that allows you to use the Dreamcast via HDMI. So there's been multiple options out there already about this. There's the one by Pound, which I did a video on. There's the Gecko and the Akura that are by the Bahar Bros. I've done videos on all of them. So it's time to stack this up because I believe this is the fourth option now available. And while they all have multiple advantages and disadvantages, I'm curious to see how this one actually stacks up by comparison. So before we talk about the device specifically, there's a couple of things I need to address in the event that you're brand new to the Dreamcast and how this exactly works and what kind of little quirks might exist in this thing even before using it. So this is more of a budget device. This one exists for $30, which I believe the Pound one was about like $25. The Gecko I think is $55, and the Akura is like $85. Those two are shipped from Turkey. Now those two have additional benefits and things that do not exist in this or the Pound cable. These have been stripped of all those types of features in order to make it cheaper. In my opinion, the Gecko is the gold standard for HDMI devices for the Sega Dreamcast, in that it gives you a perfect lossless picture while also having some additional benefits. The most important of which is something this one lacks, but at the same time I can't even really judge it, but I'll explain. Now when it comes to the Sega Dreamcast, the basic idea behind this concept is that the Sega Dreamcast utilized VGA output on its games, which meant it could run most of its games in 480p, at the time enhanced definition. Now as time has gone on, people have wanted to tap into that signal on modern televisions because frankly the Dreamcast cleans up very well and it looks a lot better than your standard composite or S-video or even RGB signals. But there is a quirk with that. While these cables are convenient, you can plug them in and theoretically just use them right away, and that will work in most cases. There are some oddballs in the group. Of the Dreamcast's nearly 800 game library, about 100 games will not natively work with this cable. What I mean by that is, in most cases, you take your Sonic Adventure, you put it in your Dreamcast, this is how you have it connected, boom, you're good to go. No problem, you're not going to run into any issues. But there are games that simply lack the code and the ability to run in VGA, meaning they would not work with this cable. There is about 100 of them. Now, again, there's a list in the description of all the games therein, so you can see which issues you'll run into. But the plus side of this is, about half of those games, basically around 50, can actually work with this cable, they just require an extra step. Now this same issue exists in the Pound cable, it exists in the Gecko, it exists in the Akura. It's not the cable's fault, it's just how the games were designed. So in all those cases, what you have to do is you have two options. You either have what's called the hardware option, which the Bahar Bros cables took advantage of. The Gecko and the Akura have a little switch on them that allow you to start them in one mode and then switch them over with a switch at the right time, allowing those games to actually work. The Pound cable and the Hyperkin cable lack this capability. Now that would sound like a negative, but to be brutally honest with you, I don't like the hardware method. I find it kind of unreliable. I've always preferred the alternative method, which is the software method. Specifically taking a disc called Codebreaker, popping that into your Dreamcast first, taking it out, and then putting in the non-compatible game, which will then provide the necessary code to force boot it into VGA mode. Which means those games would run with this cable provided you take the extra step. And then there's about 50 odd games that no matter what you do, you can't get it to work with this cable or any of the other VGA or HDMI cables. You just can't. The code isn't there. It's not possible. So while that all might sound rather complicated and and perhaps be even intimidating. What I'm telling you is the majority of the time you're not going to have a problem. The vast majority of the games you're going to want to play for the Sega Dreamcast, you're going to pop them in with this cable attached and it's going to work. That's not really an issue. That's just kind of an asterisk to include, but again, information in the description. There are some even more odd exceptions where some games will work regionally and not others. So for example, Skies of Arcadia, the North American and Japanese versions would work with this cable. They have the VGA code in them. The European and Australian PAL copies do not, so they would not work with this cable. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, another perfect example. The original release in Japan, the American release, and the European release would not work. The re-release in Japan, called JoJo's Bizarre Adventure for Matching Service, does have VGA code in it and therefore would work with this cable. Now those are the exception, not the rule. Like I said, the majority of the time, none of this is going to be a problem, but I just want to make sure everyone understands that up front, that this will not support 100% of the games, but it will support the vast majority. So, now that we understand all of that, hopefully, it's time to take a look at the cable itself. Now, the cable itself is by Hyperkin, which is cool that they're getting into the game here. I met one of their representatives at Portland Retro Game Expo, actually. So inside, there's not really much to this. It's just a cardboard box and then there's a cable. So the cable just looks very basic. It does not have a breakaway point, meaning you can't swap out the HDMI cable part for another cable. It also means you could not connect, say, the M cable directly to it. The M cable is a separate entity. It's something I've been talking about for a long time. I did a video on it. Long story short, it's a very fancy HDMI cable that has an anti-aliasing processor in it that really cleans up a lot of games, and it does make the Dreamcast look amazing. It would be possible to get this to run with it if you used a switch box that was compatible, but that's its own entity. The majority of the time, you're not going to be worrying about that. However, that is technically a negative, as I believe the second iteration of the pound cable did allow you to swap it out and therefore did not have that problem, meaning it was upgradable. Even if you didn't want to use the M cable, if this part of the cable broke, you could at least replace it. With this particular version that's hardwired, you can't do that. And then when it comes to the cable itself, a little piece of advice I always give people is the Dreamcast requires an extremely solid connection when plugging this part into the back of the console. Even myself, I've noticed over time, I'll plug it in and I won't get a signal and I won't know why. It's because despite, you might think it's all the way in, it's not. You have to apply a lot of pressure to make sure this thing is in solid, so be sure to do that. But aside from that, there's not much else to say on this thing at this point in time. There's an LED on it, so clearly it'll light up when it's connected. That's a good way of knowing, of course, if the connection is actually solid, because other than seeing a picture, you'll see a light on there, so you know it's actually getting power. But yeah, beyond that, really we're gonna run it soon and take a look at it, but yeah, basically the goal with this cable is, in my opinion, the Bahar Bros set the gold standard because they took the VGA signal and just give us a perfect one-to-one pass-through. And then they created bonus features on top of it. Bonus features that some would argue are optional. In fact, I would make that case. The Akura had a bunch of features I didn't feel were necessary. And while I like the option of a hardware switch, even I would argue I don't use it. I know the software method and I like the software method, so I would argue you don't necessarily need it. So in a fantasy, in a perfect world, this cable could theoretically be the best. We don't know yet. I'm not saying it is. I have to try it. But if it gives you a perfect one-to-one VGA signal, and for the budget price of only $30, that could theoretically be the best option to go to. Is it? I don't know. Let's find out. Okay guys, I've been using this thing for a little while now, and so it's time for final thoughts. Nothing really to add, nothing I really observed that I didn't already kind of pick up on or guess on in the first part of the video. It's really just, I want to just talk about the devices itself. And to be honest with you, it's not the best one I've ever worked with. It's not the worst either. It's very much in the middle of the road. It's better than this. This is the pound cable. I did a video on this before. This is the revision 1. I know there's a revision 2 of this now, so I haven't tested that. I can't say for sure how that compares. Basically, this cable is exactly what it says it is. It's a plug-and-play cable. That's all it is. It doesn't do anything special. It doesn't have really any redeeming benefits except for the price factor. It's because it's only $30. As opposed to, say, something by the Bahar Bros, which is usually $55 or even $85, depending on the model you want. But to be honest with you, I can't say I'd actually sit here and recommend it. This is certainly not how I would use the Dreamcast, but that said, it's an improvement over the pound. Like if these are your two choices, if you're unwilling to get the Bahar Bros cable, which is your mistake, to be honest with you, that's fine, it's your choice. This is the one to go with between the two. Granted, again, this is revision 1. Revision 2 might be better. I don't know. But yeah, it didn't have like compatibility issues or anything that I wasn't unaware of. It was just the video quality just wasn't as good. I'll show you an example. This first picture here is from Sonic Adventure. It's just a still shot using the pound cable. It's a direct connection, straight capture, screen cap. Next up, this is the Hyperkin cable. It is maybe not so much on a compressed YouTube video as obvious what the difference is, but it was slightly improved. It was a little less pixelated, a little less dirty, for lack of a better word. The next one is the Bahar Bros cable, a straight pass-through, which is the Bahar Bros boxes are straight VGA boxes that just pass the signal right through. They don't introduce any sort of issues. And then finally, just to show you the extreme possibilities, this is the Bahar Bros box using an M cable. Again, it's fancy HDMI cable, did a video on it. And as you can see, the difference is night and day. Now, I don't expect everyone to do that, but or to do whatever you want, obviously. But yeah, the Hyperkin cable is not compatible with the M cable because it has no way to connect to it unless you use a switch box, but that requires different parts and compatibility and all that stuff. But if you're looking for convenience, yes, this has it. But as far as video quality goes, it is below the Bahar Bros box. It is below your standard VGA box. It's just essentially a VGA adapter that introduces additional video noise that doesn't need to exist. It does it better than the Model 1 pound cable, but to be honest, that's not really saying much. So it's convenient and it's affordable, but it's not the ideal way to play your Dreamcast. It's not the way I personally would do it. But that said, if you want to check it out, there's a link in the description. Thank you again to Castlemania Games for providing it. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you all later.